Now, in the wake of the weekend stabbings, many are now drawing comparisons between the London terrorist attack and Palestinian terrorism aimed at Israelis. But despite the many similarities, global media outlets are reluctant to cover these events through the same lens. And here to explain now is Israeli news anchor and journalist Lital Shemesh. Lital, thank you so much for joining with us.
Hi, good evening.
Now, you notice a difference between the way that terror attacks are being covered inside and outside of Israel, is that correct?
Yes, of course. I mean, I've been covering this issue for quite some time. I mean, you can see every time there's a terror attack occurring in Israel, the headlines on the international media would be a Palestinian was shot by a police officer. Only when you scroll down the item, you can see that that Palestinian was actually stabbing Israelis, stabbing Jews, time and time again. CNN is choosing to write the word terrorist in brackets as if it's something we can debate about whether that person was a terrorist or not. Whilst the entire weekend I was following the news abroad, the CNN, Fox News, people were covering this story 24/7, the stabbing attack in London. Whilst when it's happening in Israel, it's as if it's something, something routine. Again, someone was stabbing Israelis, stabbing Jews, as if it's something we should just take for granted. And I think it's just simply wrong.
So what have you noticed about the current attack in the UK then? How would you characterize the differences?
Immediately, everyone were talking about the fact that there's a terrorist. You can see the headlines were all around the victim. There was a terror attack in England. All the international media was covering it, and not from the side of the terrorist being a victim, whilst whenever there is a terror attack in Israel, you could see on the headlines what happened to the stabber, to the Palestinian who was stabbing Jews, and not the victims. You won't see Israelis were killed in a stabbing attack. You would see
Sure.
You would see a Palestinian was shot by a police officer after trying to stab Jews. And you can see that time and again. And that one time I was in England, and I've asked a reporter of the BBC, why is that every time there's a terror attack in Israel, you're covering it from the side of the person who was the terrorist, and you're writing in the headlines what happened to the Palestinian. And he told me a very concerning answer. He told me, it's more clickbait when you have the Palestinians on the headlines and not Jews or Israelis. So it's simply creating fake news for the sake of getting more clickbaits for your website. I think it's very concerning. And it's also important for me to say it's also a combination of pure anti-Semitism, as if it's acceptable when Islamic extremist jihadists are doing it in Israel, are murdering Jews in Israel. It shouldn't be acceptable, not in England, not in Europe, and especially not in Israel.
So my final question for you, Lital, is there anything that Israel can really do to change this other than, asking for corrections from different publications, which, as we all know, first of all, is reactionary and oftentimes too late?
I think people in Israel are constantly trying to fight those all those fake news, trying to create headlines in social media. For example, when CNN decided to publish all the recent attack during the Ramadan, the recent Islamic attack all over Europe, and they somehow forgot to put Israel on the map, people in Israel started emailing CNN editors to place Israel back on the map, and they've apologized and then published a new map. So I think that could be a way to fight all the fake news and everything that's all the misleading coverage on Israel on international media.
All right, Lital, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.